Heather, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am really excited to hear your story. We have a lot to cover and dive into. So tell us about yourself and who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Heather Jose. I was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer at the age of 26 back in the 1990s. So 1998, I was diagnosed. And the longer that I've lived with metastatic disease, the more I realized that I just was so naive when it all happened. I mean, at 26, you're just building a life. So I was married. I had a 14-month-old daughter. I was working as an occupational therapist in the schools. And, I found out about cancer from a follow-up, kind of my 1 year appointment with my PCP. So
And you've been living with metastatic breast cancer now for 28, almost 28
27
years,
years. Yeah.
27
Yep.
years. And I think this is going to be so helpful for so many people who are newly diagnosed and are struggling and worried what are the next few years and hopefully much longer than that bring. So I think this is such a great conversation. Let's go back to that time when you were diagnosed.
Sure.
How did you find out?
So I had gone to this appointment, and actually, my husband and daughter were with me because the woman, the doctor who delivered my daughter, was a friend of my brother. So we kind of had a personal connection as well. So we'd kind of gone just thinking it was just a sort of a check-in. And during that appointment, I mentioned that I was having some pain in my sternum. And again, I carried a lot of bags and things happened. So I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And also, like, you could take like ibuprofen or Tylenol and it would go away. But as soon as my doctor started doing the exam, she saw that my nipple was retracted. And that had happened throughout the course of pregnancy and, then breastfeeding, whatever. It had happened naturally, and I felt like people had seen it. And honestly, again, I didn't know, and we didn't have the internet in the same way to realize that that could be cancer. But that started the process. So within a couple of days, I knew that it was cancer. And then within a week, I found myself sitting in an oncologist's office, and I had just come from a bone scan, which led to additional x-rays, like all the things that just make you, get more and more nervous because that's not the plan. And the oncologist actually was really upset that he was delivering the news. And he told me so. And then he came in to the exam room and he told me to get my affairs in order. So,
And here we are.
and here we are. So I literally, at that point, my husband's like, I don't know how you could even speak because I couldn't talk. But my response to him was, I'm 26 years old and that's the best you can do for me. And he said, well, we can try some chemo, but I'm not making any promises. So that's the first and last time I talked to him. And it just talks, speaks to how important it is to be mindful of your words as a healthcare provider, right?
Oh, 100%. I think the language that we use is so critical. And I'm always reminded of this, that the words that we say as oncologists, as healthcare providers, we say many words all day long, but it's those words that the patient will live with for the rest of their life. And it
And
matters.
wrestle with. I mean, I
Mhm.
wrestled with those words for so long. I had to, figure out what my comeback was to them, because
Mhm.
it felt so incredibly daunting.
And in the 90s, we didn't have HER2 yet, or
No,
it's right
no.
around. So what was the treatment? Did you go through chemo?
Yeah, so the next day my brother again, as a doctor, he went back to his med school and started looking for doctors, and he found my doctor, Sophia Mariver, at the University of Michigan. And she called me that day and said, look, you're a U of M patient. We will work with, this. I believe you can live. And the first thing I will say is that she asked me all about myself first. Like, and then we talked about cancer, which was so like, oh my gosh, she cares who I am,
Yeah. Mhm.
So yeah, we started with adriamycin and taxotere. And then again, I was actually enrolled in a clinical trial for a double stem cell transplant.
Mhm. And now we don't do transplants now, but back then, that was what was being done.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do have people like ask me, oh, do you think that made the difference? And I'm like, no, I don't think. And I mean, we have to trust science and the fact that
Mhm.
the clinical trials are there for a reason. And stem cell transplants were very, very hard on people,
Yeah. Oh,
and they didn't get the outcomes they wanted. And so
mhm.
therefore we shouldn't be using them.
Exactly. And I think now we do transplants for leukemia, and lymphoma, but back then it was there was a lot of convincing data at the time that it would work. What was your experience with it?
It was it was really hard. But I was very much like all in. What can we do? Right from the start, my doctor had said in the first conversation, drink some green tea, eat some fruits and vegetables, and we'll start killing cancer on Monday. And this was a Friday. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay. So I was very much like, what can I do? It felt very empowering that I didn't have to just wait for a treatment. I could also be a part of it.
Mhm.
And then I just jumped in with everything else. But the transplant was incredibly hard. And I remember, I mean, I got pneumonia. I was inpatient for about 3 weeks for the first one. I got pneumonia in the middle of that. I remember, like, in the middle of the night thinking, I am not dying of pneumonia in all of this. And
Mhm.
but it was terrible. There are days I don't remember. It
Yeah.
was really hard.
And you had a very young toddler at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
The hospital that I went to is 2.5 hours from my house. So there was a lot of logistics of who can watch Sydney, my daughter, what days is my husband going to work? He was a young teacher at the time, my mom, everybody, this whole coordination. We had like a little etch-a-sketch kind of toy up in the hospital. And I remember that every morning my PA would come in and tell me what my levels were, what my
Yeah.
blood counts looked like, and she would draw a picture on the etch-a-sketch. So again, you have to keep the fun, and you
You.
do need to bring your personality into things, but it
Yeah.
was challenging.
I can imagine. And so now looking back, right, it's 27 years later. Can you give, we'll talk about all the impact of MBC on your life in a second, but what has treatment looked like for you in these last 27 years? And are you currently on treatment?
Yeah. So my first year was really that intense
Mhm.
treatment where I did chemo, the stem cell. I ended up doing a double mastectomy after the stem cell, and then I did radiation. And then from there, I transitioned to tamoxifen. I was on it for a couple of years. We had a slight progression. I was diagnosed, I should say, with innumerable bone mets. So we had a million of them. Um, and then from the tamoxifen, we moved to Arimidex. And then after a couple years of that, again, a slight progression. And then my doctor was like, hey, there's this new drug called Foslodex.
Mhm.
This is what we're moving to. And that was in 2004. And I've been stable on Foslodex since then.
That's
So,
that's amazing.
yeah.
And you're so active in the breast cancer community. There has been, I mean, just a monumental growth in how we treat MBC in the last 20 years. It's really incredible to see. How do you, what's your take on it, right? Seeing new drug after new drug get
No,
approved.
it's great. I think
Mhm.
it's wonderful. One, I understand the challenge that women have when you get diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, especially, if you're diagnosed de novo and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, do everything, take it out, cut it off, all these kind of things. And that we're not necessarily doing that anymore. And from a quality of life standpoint, I completely understand that. And I wish like that I had been able to maintain, keep my breast, all of these kind of things. But from the way your mind races standpoint, I understand that I think it's challenging sometimes when women get put on a medicine that doesn't seem to be like attacking in the way
Mhm.
we were taught to think about cancer, you
Yeah.
know?
Hmm.
And also when you're sometimes on some of these medicines like a Foslodex or whatever, where you can maintain a quality of life, you're still dealing with the fact that you have metastatic
Yeah.
disease and it's not as obvious to the people around you. So in some ways you're expected to just kind of carry on in a way that I don't know that mentally and just emotionally you're prepared to. So
And one of the questions that I get asked a lot in my patients who are diagnosed with MBC, and as time goes and some of them fortunately have long responses, is
sure.
they ask, will I ever not worry about this? And or and so in your experience, when you're getting scans, when you're getting blood work, whatever it is, has that changed? Do you worry as much for the scans now as you may have in the past?
Don't worry about it as much
Mhm.
anymore. I do. I mean, everybody gets some scanxiety. That happens, right? I do take a lot of reassurance in the fact that, again, early on, my doctor had said, we were talking about Herceptin actually, we'll just put that in our back pocket. And like, think about how many more drugs we've been able to put in our
Yeah.
back pocket over the
Mhm.
years. So that's great, you know? Um, but I think when you live with metastatic disease, it is hard to separate normal aches and pains from
Yeah.
cancer,
Mhm.
right? And also just kind of, how can I deal with this or what will happen if there's a change?
Yeah.
You know that your life can change with a scan. That doesn't go away.
And how do you handle those aches and pains with
I,
in terms of mental mindset of like, I know this is probably, a normal thing. I lifted or I twisted funny,
yeah,
but what if it's cancer? And I think so many people really struggle with
yeah.
that
I've
mental part of
actually
it.
kind of come up with a system for that, and we've talked about it on my podcast before. But like, basically, if I have something that's achy, again, because I had bone mets, that's generally what I'm thinking about, either that or headaches. If I have something that is reoccurring 2 to 3 days, I will say it out loud. Like, you know how you kind of think
Mhm.
about it. And then
Yeah.
I'll just kind of say it out loud, oftentimes to my husband. Um, and he knows just to kind of like, okay, like let's run back through the last couple days. What did you do? You
Mhm.
lifted really hard the other day, or I get a, a crick in my neck when I sleep wrong too, or whatever that looks like. But then if that doesn't kind of quiet it after a few days, I will usually reach out, to
Yeah.
my oncologist. But 9 times out of 10, those first two things, saying it out loud and just kind of working through it, it
Mhm.
goes away.
I like this, the saying it out loud, because I think for anything we worry and ruminate it
Yeah.
internally, and then saying it
Yeah.
out loud, I think almost, I don't know that it changes the fear around it, but I think putting it out there is
It
important.
releases it in a way,
Yeah.
right?
I talk
Yeah.
about that a lot with patients who are, dealing with a lot of anxiety and stress. Is do a brain dump. Just put it on paper, write it out, say it out loud, get it out of the brain. And then when you see it in writing, sometimes you're like, oh, I can handle this, right? Or here are things that I'm afraid of, and here's what I'm going to do to take action on them.
Yeah, or yeah, I've done a ton of journaling over my time, and especially when I was first diagnosed, I spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff. And I did just learn early on that there was a release, and it didn't have to be involving even a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. I want to talk a little bit about relationships during these last almost 3 decades. Cancer and metastatic cancer changes relationships in
Absolutely.
so many ways. And, my patients will tell me my partner is afraid to touch me. They don't want to hurt me. It's all coming from a good place, but I think it's really, really hard. Can you talk a little bit into the degree that you're comfortable with about your relationship with your daughter, with your husband, fertility, right? All of these things that you then had to handle as a young woman.
Yeah, my husband is a rock star and he's naturally a caregiver. Like he's a better caregiver than I am. It's better that in ways that I'm a patient and he's a caregiver. He also is very good at separating caregiving from seeing me as a woman. And
Mhm.
I have so appreciated that. But we've had very honest conversations for years about what intimacy looks like. When I first had my double mastectomy, I was flat for 2 or 3 years. And then I did reconstruction. And even going through all of those type of things, I just was like, please don't really touch these aren't breasts
Mhm.
anymore. They're not sexual. They don't bring me any pleasure anymore. It's easier for me just to, please leave
Yeah.
it alone. And he
Mhm.
was like, of course that's fine. But also he's like very much the one to say, I still see you exactly the way I did, back then. When you're diagnosed so young, I think honestly, you just haven't even come into all of your sexuality. You don't even know really what what all of that looks like in pleasure and intimacy, what that is. And I mean, being put in menopause at 26,
Yeah.
like it changes a lot of things, right?
Hmm.
Libido, dryness, all of those things. And we've just tried to work through them, all the time. It's a constant thing for us to be able to, keep connecting from an intimacy standpoint. But we work on it and we talk about it. We talk about things that are helpful, for our relationship. So
And I think the communication piece is really important.
it is.
Yeah. I think
It
sometimes
is.
people are scared of putting it out there and saying,
Yeah.
and it's sometimes, and I think the hardest part too is that things that may have felt good in the past don't feel good now. And so how do you pivot, right? The
Yeah.
sensation, things, different erogenous zones, foreplay, all of those things change a lot. And it is hard
Yeah.
to say, this helps me feel good and this doesn't make me feel good.
Yeah. And it's been incredibly helpful. I mean, I was raised like conservative Christian, we
Mhm.
never like, you don't talk about sex. You just
Yeah.
know
Hmm.
what the rules are, right?
Yeah.
But when my husband, as we started going through this, he's like, "Hey, are you interested in trying a vibrator? Would you be willing?" You know what I mean? He's
Hmm.
very interested in me enjoying.
Yeah.
Um, and that's been wonderful. And I'll honestly, I just was reading within the last year that there's some research saying that vibrators do help,
Hmm.
and I think for me it absolutely helped with not being as, dry and all of that kind of stuff. So like, you
Yeah.
know,
It's
try
important.
things, talk
And
about
it
things. And I honestly, I also feel like younger people are just more in like pursuing those type of things anyway, and I'm thankful for that.
exactly. I do think that, but I agree that there are still very many cultural, religious barriers in talking about it. And, although we've spent a lot of time talking about younger breast cancer being on the rise, I do think, and I've heard this from patients, that sometimes older women feel like there is less focus on those
Absolutely.
conversations for them. And I think it's really important that every single
Hmm.
person is entitled and should have a wonderful sex life. And how do we have, and I think having this conversation, even if it helps one person say something to their partner or buy a vibrator or,
Yes.
figure out how to find pleasure, it's
Yep.
important.
And I will say too, like, I mean, I've listened to many podcasts and different things, but we do kind of plan it. Like, it's easier for me to kind of know. Like, we
Mhm.
have this little system that we use, and it just works better for me than like, oh, should we have sex today? Or, oh, I should, or, you know what I mean? It just helps me turn off my brain and go, yep, this is when it's happening,
Mhm.
and we'll enjoy it when, then.
And I think it looks different for each person and each
Does.
partnership. I think that's the huge thing,
Yes.
is that what works for you may not work for someone else. And I love that you said about experimenting and figuring it out and being open to having those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what about fertility? Is that something that was brought up when you were diagnosed?
And things have changed dramatically. And I
Yeah.
don't know that my response would have changed, but it was a conversation that was 2 sentences long. My oncologist said, "Were you planning to have more children?" I just kind of stopped and stuttered. My mom was in the appointment and she said, "You were planning to have more kids?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "That's not going to happen now." And it might have been even after the first treatment, to be honest. I don't
Mhm.
know if I would have been in a mind space to be able to go, okay, let's wait and preserve eggs first. And I don't know if I would have been,
Yeah.
honestly.
Hmm.
Um, but that was a conversation. Now, again, I'm a pretty determined person, and we we adopted a child from India,
Mhm.
and he came home in 2002. He was born in 2001. So, um, you know, where there's a will, there's a way, and Ty was absolutely meant to be a part of our family,
Mm. Oh,
but
that's
it was
wonderful.
not easy either.
No, adoption after a cancer diagnosis, I don't know what it was like back then, but it is very hard now. I have patients who are trying to do it, and there are so many legal barriers and hoops that they have to jump through. It is you have to be determined because it is the, the odds are stacked against you, I think, in some
Yeah.
cases.
Yes, I haven't kept up with it either, but for us, it was an 18-month process.
Mhm.
9/11 happened during that time. There was a lot of things
Yeah.
that happened. But yeah, it's challenging. We know that. And it just seems sometimes like, why are we making it so hard for
Yeah.
families to be
It
put together?
it's really hard. How much now that your children obviously are in their 20s, but
Mhm.
growing up, how much did they know and what were the conversations you had about your diagnosis?
Yeah, they've always just known about it, and we've always just talked about it as like, I've got to go get my medicine, or I'm having a surgery, or whatever. We've always just
Mhm.
kind of talked about it in a way. I remember Sydney actually, like, she was just starting to talk when I was bald, mommy's bald, or I remember her saying like mommy's medicine. But it's just been a part of their life to a point where I don't think it really has impacted them in a way that you might expect, right? Like my
Mhm.
daughter's getting married soon,
Oh,
and it's such a huge, like, to be a part of these milestones, I always talk about it's the everyday that you really want, but the milestones are really big. Um, but I don't think she's thinking about me being at her wedding.
yeah.
I think she
Mhm.
just, and that's like such a gift, right? That it's just in reverse. It's such a gift.
It
So
it is such a wonderful gift that, you
she
know,
can take it for
she can
granted.
she can take it for granted exactly that you're going to be there, and that's really, really wonderful. I just have chills
Yeah.
hearing that.
Yeah. And Ty
Congratulations.
will tell you that he's thankful for cancer because he probably wouldn't be a part. You know what I mean? It wouldn't have happened the way.
Yeah. The
And again with that, I have some problems with the way people talk, about adoption and different things anyway. And people will tell him he's so lucky, and I'm like, no, 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 like we're so lucky. And
yeah.
also we shouldn't have to be talking about things like luck when we
Yeah.
really are just wanting to be a family.
Yeah. And all families are perfect in their own way, or
Yeah,
come together in their own way. What about, so you mentioned you were an occupational therapist.
therapist. Yeah.
What happened with your career?
Well, I mean, this is the thing we're not talking enough about is
Yeah.
the financial impact
Mhm.
of cancer and of trying to live with metastatic disease and work. I immediately went on disability, and fortunately, I was approved for that. But I did that for probably 5 years, and then I went back to work. I've never worked full time since then because my health has to come first. It has to come first. And even 27 years out, I'm still managing appointments, and I think my energy level is somewhat different, even though I
Yeah.
walk and I do all these things. There's just a baseline for me that's a little bit different than other people. Um, so for myself, I work PRN kind of in nursing homes right now, so I can choose shifts. I've never been able or felt that I was able to give, 100% to my career in that way. And now, I mean, I'm fine with kind of moving away from it and spending time in the metastatic breast cancer space, but it is really a challenge for people. And when I look again at my daughter and her fiance that they're building, right? And they're building and saving and all these things. I'm so proud of them. But when we didn't do anything wrong. My husband and I didn't do anything wrong. We just got hit with something that it's unrecoverable, really, financially.
And I think we don't talk about it enough. And especially when you're diagnosed at a younger point, you don't have the savings, and now your career trajectory completely changes. You know, the time toxicity of a cancer diagnosis and treatment, it's
Yes,
how much time you spend
yes,
labs, waiting, appointments, scans, more appointments, more scans, more waiting. And it becomes so challenging to maintain employment.
yeah. And your employers are like, yeah, we'll work with you, and then they get tired of working with you. You know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah,
mean?
it's true. I mean, um I have so many patients who, have come back to work, and they're expected to be in they've been told will be supportive, but they're expected to be 100%. So
Yeah,
they're supportive when you're 100% at
yeah,
your capacity. And I think that really is hard, because for not even just the time, but the impact of the treatments on cognitive function, on fatigue, on your energy levels. I mean, all of that really can be very hard. And then again, now that impacts your financial and insurance, and your
yes,
ability to save and plan. And I think especially in metastatic disease, where there is no finite treatment period.
right, right.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we don't talk about it often enough, but we see it. I mean, we see it in people who, and it's a pervasive problem in the healthcare system, because people then don't come for an appointment, and they get, labeled as non-compliant. But no, they were going to lose their job if they took another
yeah,
day off. Like, they couldn't come,
yeah, yeah.
and I think there's just not enough resources built into the healthcare system to, we can't treat people, can't get chemo on Saturday or on evenings and things like that, right? So how are you expected to do everything in business hours?
I And I think it's also cultural. Like we
Yeah.
just have to get rid of the bootstrap mentality, like
Mhm.
just, oh, you got hit with that, but just pull yourself up. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Mm. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean, so you can. I think we are, as a culture, not great at asking for help, just not great at asking for, or not even that. Like, I think there is sometimes people tell me I'm embarrassed to ask for help.
I agree with that, but I also feel like because you have a metastatic cancer diagnosis, you shouldn't have to ask for a GoFundMe. Like I wish our
Yeah.
system better
Hmm.
supported people with, diseases. And I would say chronic, but I also have, issues with we can't call it chronic
No,
and then
it's
take
not chronic.
away the benefits. It's still terminal,
Yeah.
but we just I think sometimes we just tire easily in our society of people's problems. So it's like figure it out
Yeah,
or get out of
exactly.
the
And I,
way.
I, I think I agree with everything that you said. We should not need a GoFundMe to get through cancer
Yeah.
treatment. Um, we should be able to. One of the things I see this all the time is scalp cooling. To be able to afford scalp cooling right now is
Yeah.
about $2,500, right? And so
Yeah.
the conversation, I'm a huge supporter of scalp cooling, and the conversation that I have with patients is, well, we should do it. I recommend it, but we got to pay attention to the cost, and here's where you can get financial support. So now the patients have to figure out how they're going to pay for it. And I
Yeah.
think this is changing because there's a lot of states and things are changing where insurance in some states, and hopefully in all, will mandate insurance coverage of scalp cooling. So I think that's going to
Uh-huh.
change. But these supportive things shouldn't be a decision to do or not do because you can't afford it, right? Or
Right. And not only
childcare.
that, so say you do want to do that and you're like, okay, I'll pursue it. How many calls is that to your insurance company,
Mhm,
two different places
mhm.
while you're working full time? And like
Yeah,
your bucket's only got so much room to handle all of these things.
exactly. Co-pays, childcare, days
Yeah.
off. I mean, you're right. Like, the
Yeah.
fact that we have to crowdsource for money to
Yeah.
afford treatment is heartbreaking. And I agree with what you said about chronic. And I think that, I don't know, I agree. I have concerns about calling metastatic breast cancer a chronic illness, because that equates it to things like diabetes and blood pressure, which
Yep.
are they're just different. They're just
They
different.
are.
They have their own challenges, but there's degrees. A well-controlled diabetes is a 3-month visit versus,
Yeah.
scans and labs, and often on a monthly basis.
Right. I agree
Yeah,
completely.
I think
Um,
And I will add too, I think everyone has to use language that feels comfortable for them.
No, I understand that. I mean, I don't talk about having terminal breast
Yeah,
cancer by any means. I often say that I'm living with,
yeah,
metastatic breast cancer. I'm not a big survivor, thriver. I've been through all those terms. I just want to be able to live with it to the best of my ability, recognizing that the challenges are there always.
yeah.
And it's not for me, it's not so much the disease itself right now. Um, it's side effects and things that have kind of come on over the years.
And having been in premature menopause
Yeah,
since
it
your
yes,
20s, right? And you're right. I mean, I think that that's a big part that we don't always talk about.
mhm,
And I'm hopeful. I think we are moving away from this notion of, well, we should be grateful that the scans are good,
yeah.
and and we should pay attention to the side effects and the quality of life impact.
Yeah, that was one conversation that we actually had quite often in San Antonio
Hmm.
when I was with the women that I was with that are, 10 years out, 5.5 years out, and way younger than me. So they're very much like, we need more, we need more. And I agree. But I was like, wait a second, you guys, at least we're talking about them now. The first
Yeah,
presentation that I went to was about quality of life initiatives, for people with
yeah.
cancer. And I'm just like, oh, warms my heart.
We never talked. I mean, this is new. We didn't talk about this. I will
Yes.
tell you, I finished my fellowship training in 2015. So not that, you know,
Yeah.
11 years ago.
Yeah.
No, and I had amazing mentors and I loved my
Yeah.
program. It wasn't taught. I
Yeah.
learned nothing about sexual health, about relationships, about mental health, about your heart health and bone health. Like none of
Yes.
that was just not taught. You got a bone density. I mean, that was it. But
Yeah.
like, and I'm so thrilled that we're having these conversations. But I
I
think the
agree.
reason that we're having the conversations is because of advocates who are speaking up and saying, wait a second, hold on.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about these things?
Hmm.
How
That's
did
wonderful.
you get involved in the advocacy community?
Um, I mean, I've been in and out of it over the years, to be honest. I think
Mhm,
sometimes, I'm just going to say, I think sometimes people get in early and it's really mentally and emotionally hard to be a
mhm,
part of. But now I'm just far enough out that I really feel like I can support and help other people. Um, so for me, it's more like being able to maybe say the things that other people don't have the energy or wherewithal to say. And as far as like actual advocacy, I've been a part of NBCC over the years. I've done some of their trainings, which were kind of a little, just not, I'm really about quality of life
mhm.
issues, not so much the research or the
Yeah.
next drug. Although I will say my oncologist has joined a consortium. She's a PI on it and asked me to be a patient advocate
Mhm.
on that project. And I think that's really awesome. I'm enjoying the meetings and hearing the science in that way. But I just want to be able to lend my experience and my voice uh, maybe in a way that other people who are more in the thick of it can't, you
Yeah.
know?
And I think that all those perspectives are so important for different reasons, and everyone brings a different
Sure.
perspective
Yes.
to it. And I think
Yeah,
it's
no, I one of my friends that was there, she reviews grants for the DoD. Like I'm like, good for you. I
yeah.
would never want to do that, but I'm so glad she does, you
And I
know.
and I really it highlights how many different roles there
There
are,
are,
right? In because it is, we need the research, if they're the new drugs, we need the science, we need the quality of life and survivorship initiatives and all of those things. And I fully believe we need patients on those trials reviewing, saying,
yeah,
does this make sense?
yeah,
Is this something that is right or not? And often, we open these trials and the patients have to come in, every 2 days for 3 weeks. And you're like, how is this feasible for anyone, right? And
right,
there was no patient advocate to review that protocol and say,
right.
wait a second. So I think it's
Yeah.
changing. It's changing a lot. But again, due to people speaking up, and San Antonio is a fantastic conference, and I think really values the role of the patient voice.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And like you said, the expansion of the quality of life and survivorship initiatives really helped me to go, oh, that's exactly where I want to be, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think everyone finds their role.
yeah, yeah,
And so sometimes people ask me, well, how can I get involved? And my takeaway on this is if you're sharing and you're using your voice, you're an advocate,
yeah.
helping people. But if someone wants to get involved kind of on a bigger scale in the NBC community, do you have any recommendations for them?
I think you have to just, you know, do some research and see what fits with you because the
Mhm.
groups are all different.
Yeah.
I feel like I do a lot of it on my own, and that's okay too. And you just have to see, yeah, what kind of, you know, makes your heart sing, and you can do a lot of different things. I'm also a retreat director for Little Pink Houses of Hope, which
Mhm.
is an organization that provides free breast cancer retreats to families with that are, you know, that are in treatment or have breast cancer. And that's just something that I get great joy out of. It's not necessarily advocacy, but it's me being able to show up and meet, you know, 10 families a couple times a year and hopefully, you know, make an impact. And that's what we're all out there to do.
I always make the point, I say this to my patients, is that advocacy can become mentally hard because you're in it
Absolutely.
all the time. And so I think part of that is recognizing, is this helping, it's helping other people? Yes. And how is it impacting you? Because we don't want to get to the point where it is negatively impacting someone's mental health.
And I will say I stepped back from it probably 15 years ago because it was too mentally hard
Mhm.
for me. It's hard to also partner with people and you know, they don't live.
Mhm.
It's hard to know you have to be able to be in a space where you can you
Yeah.
know, separate things. And one of the reasons I started my podcast was also kind of all of the messages that I would get from people. And it was like, okay, how can I respond in a way that better serves this community
Mhm.
without having to interact personally,
Yeah.
you know, time after time?
And one of the reasons I love podcasts, and actually the reason that I started mine was because sometimes people aren't ready to be in a
No,
bigger space. They're not ready to be in a support group or engage at a conference. And so what I love about podcasts is that you can just listen on a walk quietly, consume what you want, but not feel like you have to be so in it.
absolutely. And you can Google it. And that was kind of, I've said this many times, like, I want people, I know they're going to Google. I don't recommend it. But
Mhm.
when they do, I want them to be able to find some glimpses of hope
Yeah.
on the internet at 3 a.m. Right. And that's where you can find a podcast like yours or mine to
Mhm.
say, okay, wait, people are making it. They're living, you know,
Because that's at 3 a.m. Those are dark thoughts at 3 a.m.
they are.
And
They absolutely are.
I
Yeah.
think in this, and I will say too, I mean, in this day and age of misinformation, there is a lot of bad Googling that happens at 3
Yeah.
a.m. And it is really important to, okay, if I'm awake at 3 a.m., what am I doing? What am I searching for online? Because the stuff online right now is really, it's bad and
Well, and even so, when I was diagnosed, it was the early days of, you know, the internet, and
yeah.
they were more like forums and things like that. And one of my mom's friends said to her, listen, there is some, you know, gold nuggets in there, but you have to sludge through so much terrible stuff.
Hmm.
I knew I couldn't do it. And my mom said, I will take that role.
Yeah.
Like I will take that on. I was very protective of my mental health early on. I did not allow extra noise to come in. And I think that protection was really important to me, you know, and it was helpful.
Yeah, I
So
agree. I think the support groups are really wonderful. I mean, some of the things that we have implemented in our practice was because a patient said to me, "Hey, I read this in my support group, and people are doing better with
yeah,
this,
yeah.
adjustment and things like that." But you're right, you have to go through a lot. And I love your suggestion of, can there be someone who looks at it for you, right? For
For,
a lot of the
yep.
new drugs, there are support groups for that drug. And I
Okay.
think it's great as we start to think about what are going to be the side effects and what do we see not on a trial, but in the real world. But it's also a lot. So if you are interested, having someone who's going to say, I'm going to take that role and I'm going to read those
Yeah.
messages for you and put it together for you.
Yeah, and even like as far as side effects, I guess I just feel like I kind of know how my brain works. And so I was very much like, I don't want to know the side effects lest I
Yeah.
manifest them.
Mhm.
So my husband would know them or my mom would know them. And if I was feeling something, in any way, shape, or form, I would put it out there and they would go, oh yeah, that is a side effect. They could like confirm that to me without me waiting for it to
Yeah.
happen.
And I think who knowing how you as an individual respond to these things is really
Yeah,
important. Some people,
yeah.
their coping mechanism is give me all the information. I want to
Everything.
know everything. And other people are like, no, 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 selective. So
Mhm.
none of that is wrong or right, but knowing where you fall in is
Yes.
so important.
Well, and that's so listening to yourself, right? There, what you're saying throughout all of this is there's not one right way to do this. It's what's best for you.
Mhm.
It's also, though, listening to that small voice in your head that says, oh, wait, this doesn't feel good to me, and support groups didn't feel right for me, especially back then. I was 30 years younger than anybody in a support group anyway.
Yeah, I mean
So
that was a different time,
it
it
was.
was a very different time. We didn't have social media. I mean, things were beginning, but it wasn't like
Yeah.
where we are now, which, and again, there's good and bad about all of it,
Yeah.
but I think now it's wonderful people can find the community and can find the support, and at the same time being mindful that it's helpful for you.
Yeah, it's helpful for you and it's moving you in the direction you want to move in, right? That
Exactly. Exactly. Anything that we didn't touch on?
I don't know. I don't think we've talked about a lot of it.
We have, I know. There's a lot
It's
more I'm sure
awesome.
to talk about, but
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I just, my experience has been, I know it's been unique, but I do believe that people are living longer with metastatic disease and therefore we do need, to talk about these quality of life issues that are a part of it. And, my goal is just to help people along the way. So I've created some digital guides to again help with some of those circumstances. Like the early days, I have a little guide that is called Break the Spiral, and it's just kind of about, stopping those thoughts. Is it true? A little bit of what we talked about with the oncologist, right?
Mhm.
And and just helping people reset maybe a little bit
I
or
think
being
that's
able to.
really wonderful and so important because we need that. And I will say, and I tell this to everybody, is voice your concerns to your medical team. If you are struggling with sexual health, mental health, brain, whatever it is, put it out there because, it's important to have that dialogue and to have that conversation.
Well, and just thinking that, if you're brave enough to say it, and then somebody else is also brave enough to say it, it's going to start getting addressed in a different way, right?
Exactly.
So, and if you have a provider that you really don't have that relationship with, then you have to look at one, does this provider meet my needs? Or two, can I find another way to supplement this? How does this look?
Exactly. And I think, dose reductions are really underutilized. They can be
Yeah,
wonderfully helpful. But it may be that your oncologist was right for you 5 years ago, and maybe now
yeah,
you need someone else, or like you said, you need to bring in other people because your oncologist is just one person of the team. And so
mhm,
maybe you need a pelvic floor therapist, maybe
yeah,
you need an occupational therapist, whatever, whatever you
yeah,
need. It looks different for everybody, but to have those conversations and to ask and to verbalize the side effects, because sometimes if we don't hear it, I
yeah,
don't know that someone's struggling with it.
yeah. Well, and also I think it is important to recognize that our oncologists are people also. And so they went into this profession to help people, right?
Mhm.
They do want to hear our concerns. And, my oncologist and I have built a long lasting relationship over the last 27 years, and from both a medical standpoint. I know how she works and she knows how I like to work, but also even, we've run a 10K together. We've done some things to,
Yeah,
just
I
be
love
together.
that. I love
Yeah.
that. Where can listeners find you online? Tell us about your podcast, your guides. Where is all that information available?
Sure. I am mostly on Instagram. I find that to be the friendliest
Yes,
place.
I agree.
Um, at Heather B. Jose, Jose. I have a website, heatherjose.com. And my podcast is called I'm Still Here, Real Conversations about Life with Metastatic Breast Cancer.
And you have almost like 270, 280
Yeah,
episodes, right? You have a
yeah,
lot. There's a lot of
yeah,
great, great content there. Thank
yeah.
you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Um, hold on, sorry.